I will admit, I already know for the most part what my political leaning is, hence the hyperbolic, facetious title of this video. No, I'm not literally a communist, but based on, how I've taken the political compass test before and where I fall center, left, libertarian on the spectrum, I'm social liberal or libertarian socialist. So let me just quickly explain what that means before we get into it. I'm going to take the test. I'm going to answer the questions and explain my answers, and I'll try and do it quickly. This will be a very long video. But if you want to understand my political views, you'll get it by me doing the political compass test. Now, I believe that libertarian communism can only really exist in very, very small scales, a tribe. Think about 12 hippies living on a farm. That's libertarian communism. No one can tell you what to do, but typically people will be like, hey, I made dinner, who wants some? And there's no exchange. Communists like to believe in this big utopian version of a world, but you can't do it that way because I don't know you and we can't control for what each other is doing. If it's me and, 10 other buddies and, Jim has just created a new water filtration system and he's like, feel free to use it. Cool. There's no need because he knows that when I'm out planting corn, I'll hook him up too. That's simple. And that's why at core, I'm very anarchic. Philosophically, I grew up, I was an anarchist, and I kind of moved away because of political reality. Let's take this test, and let me break down for you how I feel and why. I'll try and go quickly. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. Well, that's an obvious yes. If globalization has to occur, like if it's going to happen no matter what, it absolutely should be supporting humanity. So it should primarily serve humanity. Strongly agree. The private interests of corporations, I do not believe should be front and center. I understand the general idea that corporations can provide benefits because you bring all these people together who have different ideas, and we're talking about development of science, tech, and infrastructure. I get it, but no, it should be to serve humanity, not the interests of some elite billionaire who's going about things without regulation. Next question. I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong. No, I will only support what is right or wrong regardless of my country. I strongly disagree with that. I will support my country to a great deal, but when the U.S. does things overseas I disagree with, I will not support that. Hence why I won't vote for Donald Trump, regardless of if he does some good things or not. It's about a bigger picture here. I'd always support my country. It has to be right. No one chooses his or her country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I disagree with that. I think we have a shared cultural heritage with our country. I don't strongly disagree, but for the most part, I think, look, man, I was born here. This is my world. This is my country. I believe in it. I believe they've done things that are bad, and I will call them out when they do so. But for the most part, I think America is a very great place, even for all its faults. It's done amazing things. And if you're born in a country, then to an extent, you can be proud of your tribe, right? Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. I completely disagree with that. There are so many factors involved in whether or not someone is going to be superior to someone else, and that to me is absurd. I will make a point though. I strongly disagree with this because I understand the greater implications, but the way you interpret the questions are important. Let me stress, I've been to Thailand, okay? I was taller than most people. The question is whether or not being taller is superior. To a certain extent, it's not. And that's the point. While I recognize there are some differences, between different, races or ethnicities, I ultimately do not believe we can quantify superiority. So no, I completely disagree. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. No way. The enemy of my enemy is not my friend. I will not support a bad candidate who does terrible things simply because they're slightly better than somebody else. No, I believe in principle. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. I disagree with that. Not strongly, because I disagree because I recognize the nuance. So I would say disagree typically errs on the side of, for the most part, yeah, we can't violate international law. We have these laws for a reason, and we shouldn't be using, committing war crimes. Absolutely not. I will recognize in a more of a Captain America approach, citing the Civil War movie, that sometimes when you see something heading south, you've got to act. So I recognize that's true in some capacities, but for the most part, I generally disagree and think we'd be better off making sure we're working together in international conflict. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. Oh, you better believe I agree with that. Next page, we got a couple more, so this will be a long video. People People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality, 100% true. A wealthy person from India has no problem, for the most part, coming to the United States. And that's something we should recognize. If you're poor in the US, you're not going to Australia. If you're poor in India, you're not coming here. But rich people can move about however they see fit. In fact, there are stories of rich people that can enter countries without passports. So I do believe class is substantially more important. Think about this. There could be an extremely impoverished nation, but the royalty or political elites are still rich, wealthier than most Americans. Yes, because even small poor nations have resources that can be exploited. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. I disagree. I think employment is more than just what you make to eat with. I think it's purpose, and purpose is important for human life. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation 100%. And this is true. I mean, you had a river burst into flames in Ohio. At least that's the story. I don't have the facts pulled up, but yes, I strongly believe in regulation. I think we need to make sure we put a check on government for sure. But I think when it comes to these big companies, they're going to act not necessarily intentionally in bad directions, though many do. We find them. We go after them when they do bad things. But there are some instances where people just veer off the path. They find success, they move in that direction, and it creates problems for the environment. So it's important then that, I'll put it this way. When that river, was polluted, so it started on fire, it was because everybody was only putting a little bit of pollution in it, and no one felt that they were the big problem. The snowflake doesn't blame itself for the avalanche. So how about we all come together, we have an agreement on the limits of what we should do, and we agree to abide by them. To me, that makes sense. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. Absolutely not. And that's the joke, right? I may be very, left libertarian, but I am not a communist. I think that is a terrible idea because you can't quantify what someone's needs or wants are for the most part. Mathematically, it's a bit nebulous. And also, we need people to be passionate and incentivized in their own right to create a wealth-driving society or planet. We want everyone to improve themselves, and that means individuals can choose better than a command economy. You can't have one person dictating who is or isn't in need or what they should be allowed to have. I'm sorry. I think people can build what they want, and that's much more better. So while I do lean left for sure, I ultimately do not like this concept. It's a sad reflection of on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. I definitely agree with that. I'm not saying they shouldn't be allowed to do it. No, by no means. But I do think it is a sad reflection, the commodification of and branding of water. I also really don't like what Nestle does when they go into these communities and they take water. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. Okay, I get it. There should be limits, in my opinion, restrictions, regulations. But for the most part, you can bottle the water, fine. I get it. I'm not a fan. I do think it's a sad reflection. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. I disagree with that. Now, there's an extent there. I won't strongly disagree, but you need to be able to have a place to call your own. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. 100%. I agree with that. I do not believe you should be able to get resources from the hardworking people of this world, I don't care where you're from, simply because you can push things around. I'm not talking about people who make investments. I'm talking about literally people who just do fast trades and extract value. Now you've got people who have millions of dollars who have literally contributed nothing. Not a fan. I get it though. This is a byproduct of the system. So I think there can be regulations, but for the most part, disagree. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. I agree with that to an extent. If you look at Trump and the trade war and all that stuff, we have to make sure we're keeping tabs and not allowing everything to just run amok and then fall apart. I think there's certain things to be said, but for the most part, I'll just leave that as it is. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. Completely disagree. Companies should exist for the betterment of everybody, of everyone. A company that makes ice cream sandwiches is making a product people like. They shouldn't be able to make inferior garbage products that hurt everybody to make an extra buck. I believe they should be doing something good. Now, if you choose to eat 500 ice cream sandwiches, that's your fault. But overall, producing a dessert is a good thing for society. So their only social responsibility should not be to drive profits. It should be that profits are earned because they've done something valuable for society. The rich are too highly taxed. I strongly disagree with that. I believe that our tax structure can be, we can tax the rich more, 100%. I just think that typically what you see from the left in this country is not planned out properly. Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax, well, as Andrew Yang pointed out, Europe's gotten away from it, okay? So yes, we can tax capital gains and other means of income, but here's the thing. While I do believe that they're not too highly taxed, and there is a limit to how much money someone really needs, I get all that. I also believe in freedom. I believe, just because I disagree doesn't mean you aren't allowed to make money. And I also think we're not taking into consideration national boundaries, technology, and international law when it comes to taxation. So while I do think the rich could be giving more towards charity and communal programs, I recognize we may not have anything we can do to solve that problem, right? What can we do? They can move their money overseas into cryptocurrencies, whatever. So don't know how you solve it, but I certainly think, in my personal opinion, I do not like the idea of oligarchs. Sorry, I don't. Excuse me. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. Completely agree. That one's simple. If you make a bunch of money, I agree you should. Keep in mind, okay? I don't like the idea of people getting money for nothing just by pushing things around. But I certainly believe that in the truest sense of what capitalism is supposed to be, a beneficial corporation that helps people around the world in some capacity, that isn't exploiting people, then you make extra money. Yes, you should get that rare and harder to seek to receive treatment. Not everyone can be cured of every disease, and some treatments are rare and expensive. But if you have the money, I do believe you should be able to have access to it. Government should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Absolutely, strongly agree. And they do, okay? We have regulations for this. You can't lie, cheat, and steal. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. 100%. If we're going to, I understand people would argue. I think it's fair to point out that a genuine free market in the truest sense is like, let the market decide. But in my opinion, you will have predatory companies that lie, cheat, and steal without regulation. So there has to be some kind of restriction. Otherwise, they'll create monopolies like Google and Facebook, shut down private speech, and then you will live in a dystopian nightmare. So I am very much in favor of regulation. The freer the market, the freer the people. I agree with, this is a tough one because it's about the interpretation of the question. I disagree. Because I'm going to interpret this question based on the idea of a true free market. And in that regard, I disagree for one reason. In an absolute free market, you will see the consolidation. Look, here's the problem. It's interpretation. I've heard people say that consolidation of power by, ever-growing companies is not a real free market. Fine, I respect that. My interpretation of this is that a true free market eventually, central power coalesces around bigger and bigger corporations, in which case, no. There has to be barriers to allow free market competition, but some restriction to stop the consolidation of power. So I'm going to put disagree. I may be interpreting this in a way you don't agree with, but that's the best I can do. Okay, we got page 3 of 6, and we're already at 13 minutes. Abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. Sorry, I strongly disagree with that because it's an authoritarian versus libertarian position. I'm not going to intervene in what the absolute reasons are. I don't believe the woman's life not being threatened is an absolute issue. I believe there's also about the health of the baby. It's complicated. But I'm going to err on the side of the government not being involved, even though I personally disagree with how many people use abortion as contraception. I very much oppose that. But in the end, I'm more so concerned about centralization of authority. The government determining what you can or can't do when it involves your own body is a complicated system. It's a complicated process. And then I understand the body of the baby is relevant too, but we have two life forms in one circumstance. And for me, I look at that and say, I honestly can't come to an ethical conclusion on what we should do. So I bow out. And I know many of you disagree with me. I'm sorry. All authority should be questioned always. Always. It doesn't mean disposed of. It just means checks and balances. And that's what our founding fathers understood. And I have tremendous respect for that. All authority should be questioned. Doesn't mean you always ignore it. It just means that when someone comes out and makes a demand, we say, why is it that you who makes a demand? In the United States, we have elected representatives. We respect that to an extent. Not every action is respectable, though. An eye for an eye, a tooth for the tooth? No way. That leaves the whole world blind. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I strongly disagree. Taxpayers, you may. Here's the thing, man. Culture, museums are very, very important. Without us choosing that some things matter to us in terms of heritage and culture, we end up just with video games and action flicks and porn. You know, I believe in a true, absolute free market. What's going to survive in the long run is not going to be the arts. So I strongly believe we must, as a society, protect cultural heritage, arts, etc. When someone is developing a new dance or music and taxpayers fund that, that's cultural development. That's important for us. And when you have a museum or a theater that shows things relevant to our culture, it is preserving and sustaining the ideals which make us strong. Otherwise, you'll end up with, in a complete free market, people who just don't care about what we believe and why. And I believe, for instance, America has a very, very beautiful and amazing culture. We've overcome great hardships, and we've maintained our knowledge through museums and taxpayer-funded programs. I think it's important. It's a challenge. I don't generally like the idea of forcing people into doing things. This is why I'm much more on the libertarian spectrum. And I'll admit it's the hardest position to be in. I don't like the idea of the government forcing you to support, history, culture, and arts. But in the end, though, I do think, look, if people are going to vote for it and support it, it's very important for us. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. I agree with that. I can't stand schools and how it's mandatory. Not at all. Choose yourself. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. No way, man. We would have too many blind spots. Diversity is a strength. Disagree with me all you want. But there's a difference between what the left is calling diversity and true diversity. The real idea of diversity was supposed to be that someone from a different part of the world with a different perspective could enrich our perspectives, and that's a fact. It's true. It doesn't mean all cultures. It just means that, there's absolutely some cultures which will be negative, but in the end, what I view as diversity being a strength is when someone comes here with a technology, a science, or a philosophy we didn't hear before. Too much, though, today is just race. It's like, oh, you're a different color, therefore that's diversity. No, I'm sorry, it's not. If you're born in America and you're raised in a Western culture, you have the same worldview as anybody based on race. But if you grow up in, say, Japan, you'll view things very differently, and you absolutely can help fill in the blind spots, and we can come together with different technologies and ideas and philosophies, and that's important. So no, people should be talking to each other and sharing ideas. Good parents sometimes spank their children. Yes. Well, let's be clear. I'm not talking about beating your kids. I'm talking about, giving them, a whop on the butt with like 10% of your force, so it doesn't actually hurt them in any way, but asserts authority as the parent and also gives a clear indicator, don't do this again. Okay? I don't think spanking is that big of a deal, although I've seen some studies that say it's really, really bad. I don't think you should beat your kids relentlessly. I'm talking about, when the kid does something, you bop them on the butt or something like that. I think that's absolutely fine. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. Yeah, of course, that's fine. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. Of course it should not. People should be allowed to imbibe what they choose. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. No way. It's to make them functioning, competent adults. Unfortunately, that's not happening either. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. Oh. You should be allowed to live your life, and no one should be able to take away from you your inalienable rights. I don't care what your circumstances of your birth were. I don't care if you're disabled. It is your life. It is your choice. And no one else should be able to impose that law to take away from you natural biological function. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. I disagree with that. I don't think it's the most important thing. I do think discipline is important. There are no savage and civilized people. There are only different cultures. I lightly agree with this. And I mean this because, again, once again, we're falling back on the interpretation of the questions. There are certain civilizations that have been accused of being savage, but probably had certain understandings of medicine. So look, I get it. I'm very much biased in favor of my own culture, but I also think understanding alternative perspectives is important. I am not defending cannibalistic or oppressive cultures. I'm saying that they're all different and they all believe something very specific. They're going to claim we're savage and we're going to claim they're savage, in which case, while I personally think there are bad cultures, I think to quantify them in these ways is biased in our own, based on our worldview. Recognizing that is a strength, because it allows us to better understand the strengths and weaknesses and why we should be opposed to certain ideas but accept good ideas that will help us. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. I agree with that. Not strongly, but I agree with it enough. Okay, there's maybe some circumstances where someone refuses to work, and for some reason we're going to support them because I do that personally. But for the most part, if you're not going to work, man, don't expect any favors from me. When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. No, think about it. Solve your problems and overcome them. Okay. First-generation immigrants can never fully be integrated within their country. No way, that's not true. Because the assumption there is that you're thinking about like a 40-year-old person who immigrates. What about a first-generation immigrant who's young? You absolutely can integrate. It is absolutely possible. And I think too many people are going to hear that and make an assumption about what that immigrant is. So no, I strongly disagree. What's good for the most successful corporation is always ultimately good for all of us. No. Look at the banking industry and the housing market and the mortgage-backed securities. So no. and we're talking about short-term versus long-term gain. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. Strongly disagree. I think there is an absolute benefit to competition between publicly funded programs and private enterprise. There can be public news funded by taxpayers as well as private. And that's an important balance. I do believe so. Next page. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. Oh, come on. Easy answer. Yes, of course. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. That's true. That's not even an opinion. That's a fact. It just means it leads to eventual destruction. So there are things that delay progress in a democratic political system, but it is true to an extent that it is faster for a more totalitarian system. Doesn't mean I agree it's a good thing. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need be worried. No way. Nope. Nah, man. Absolutely not. You absolutely do need to be worried about abuse of power, someone spying on you. We've heard stories of people spying on ex-girlfriends. Not going to happen. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious of crimes. I'm going to put disagree, not strongly. I'm very much against the death penalty, but not strongly enough to where I would protest it. So I'm not going to put strongly. And I'm also willing to recognize the will of the people. And it's tough. It's tough because this is a very thick moral conundrum for me. But if most people are on the side of we're going to support the system, I don't feel strongly enough to adamantly oppose it, but I will voice my opposition. So I'll just put regular disagree. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. Nah, America is a country where you can be from the gutter and tell the president to go shove off. And that's what makes this country great and successful. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. No way. Art is in the eye of the beholder, man. We're talking about pictures. You don't know what something means to somebody or inspires. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. No. We want a functioning and effective society and progress. We want to do better, be stronger and faster, and that means we must figure out how to solve these problems, not just feel good by hurting somebody. It is a waste of time to try and rehabilitate some criminals. I absolutely disagree. Absolutely disagree. We should absolutely try to rehabilitate everyone we can. We have to try. We have to. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. I disagree. And I'm not saying the artist and the writer are more important than the businessman. I'm saying what makes a culture great is our success in terms of technological development and advancement, but also the writer and the artist help advance philosophical understandings. They help us explore and find hidden truths and meaning. And to claim the writer and the artist, also I need you to consider religion, which I think is very important. Philosophy and religion fall in the writer-artist portion of that. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. No, I think their first duty is to be individual human beings who can choose for themselves what they want to do. If that's be a homemaker, fine. If they have a career, fine. It's their choice. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing nations. I somewhat agree with this. This has to do with Monsanto. It has to do with, manipulating genes. And then I'm going to avoid getting into a legal battle with Monsanto, but you can look it up. There are big companies that have done things for political gain, and it is problematic. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. I strongly disagree with that. Absolutely not. I'm pretty anti-authoritarian. Page 5, astrology accurately explains many things. No, it doesn't. You cannot be moral without being religious. I completely disagree. You absolutely can be moral without being religious. Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. I disagree. I do believe charity has done much better things than Social Security and things that can't be addressed by government, but I don't want to say it's better. It's not about one being better than the other, okay? Some people are naturally unlucky. I disagree with that. I disagree with it because the way I'm viewing it is this argument that it's not my fault I failed. No, you can, I mean, I don't strongly disagree because I understand opportunity and the cards were dealt matter, but you got to make your own luck, man. It is important that my child's school instills religious values. I strongly disagree with that. It may be important to you, not to me, and that's fine. The private schools exist. I went to Catholic school for a little while. If that's what you choose, it's important, but for me, not really. Next page and the final page. Lovemaking outside of marriage is usually immoral. Disagree. Individual liberty, man. You do you. A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Completely agree with that. There are so many kids who need families, and I'm not gonna judge. If you can give a child a good family, if you have a loving, stable relationship that is powerful and important, and it's better than kids growing up in foster care and falling in the gutter. I will tell you that. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. General agree because of the potential for some of it to go nuts, but no, yeah, you do what you want. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Absolutely. I understand what they're saying with this question, okay? They're talking about two people who choose to go and do an act in private that's presumably between them and safe to a certain extent. Lovemaking. Hey, man, you do you. I got no beef. Take it in your bedroom. That's what you're all about. No one can feel naturally homosexual. I strongly disagree with that because I know people who have told me that's not the case and I believe them. That's about all I can do. And I would also argue this based on the fact that I don't, and I strongly feel heterosexual, and I can imagine the same feeling I have towards women, someone might have towards a same-sex couple, in which case I entirely believe that's the possibility. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. I disagree with that. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think in some capacities it has. That's why I'm not strongly disagreeing. But in general culture, in general television, I'm not talking about the fringe weirdos on the internet. I think for the most part, it's fine. Now let's see where you stand. I already know where I stand. I'm a commie. Didn't you guys notice this? Let's scroll down and, oh my God. Look at that. I'm further left and libertarian than Bernie Sanders. And I believe I've explained all of my positions, right? Did you agree with how I broke everything down? I think it makes sense. I feel like it's, so there it is. Look, see, I got allergies. Social libertarian. Yes. I much prefer to live on a farm with a bunch of hippie buddies. It is what I do. I mean, I have a bunch of friends who work with me. I am very, very economically flat when it comes to how I run business. Pardon the allergies. I am in no way a hardcore top-down capitalist who tries to extract value. I overpay people. I give people, responsibility and authority over their projects. And when I look at this, I'm actually surprised as left and libertarian as it is, but yeah, that's just how I feel. Take a look at everything I've said. I've explained my feelings, right? This is where I've ended up. I think the way I've explained it makes sense, is consistent, and there you go. Now let me explain exactly why you'll probably see my politics where they are when it comes to YouTube videos. For one, intersectionality is not on the left-right spectrum. It is an ideology. It is typically an authoritarian ideology, and I strongly oppose authoritarianism. Many Trump supporters also oppose that authoritarianism as well, but I'm critical of Trump for some of his more authoritarian actions and more right-wing approaches. I think it's fair to say, for the time being, those that believe in liberty, regardless of the left or the right, we're going to be friends. And those that believe in authority, we're not going to be friends. And that's the easiest way to explain it. So there you go. My political compass test. This is a long video. Stick around. The next one that's coming up is going to be a conversation with Sam Cedar, and we're going to talk about a lot of these positions. And stick around. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all in the next segment.